One of the
Welcome
many.
to World Water Day 2021. This is the next to last event of the day, not the last. And we have saved the best for last, Erin Brockovich. She's beyond words. She is beyond reckoning. She is a force of power, of passion, of beauty, and of commitment. She has been earnestly committed to protecting waters, particularly in low-income and minority communities around America. And she single-handedly took on Pacific Gas and Electric, and she won. And she won for the people, because she's all about being of service to others, and her generosity, and her kindness, and in her brilliance and passion for health, and caring for us as water beings, and caring for this planet. I could go on and talk about Erin, but I want to spend time with Erin for us to be chatting about our kinship, which we've fostered recently and is so rich and so wonderful and delicious. I'm so grateful. So what I want to start with, Erin, is you're this sweet girl from Lawrence, Kansas.
Sweet. Nobody's ever said I was sweet.
It's about time. And you grew up with lots of discipline, lots of structure, amazing parents, which gave you this foundation of who you are today. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about your childhood and the upbringing and the time you spent in nature and how it made you appreciate things. And you've talked about your learning differences and the true gift that they are. And you're just such a human being. It's for us to understand, as you say, Superman, I think it's Superwoman, that we all are Superman or Superwoman, and you are the epitome of that. So let's hear your story.
Oh my gosh, it's nice to see you again, Stuart. And everyone, thank you for having me today. And, it's a kindred spirit, and I really appreciate your time and all the work that you do. And as water beings, I like that. That's a new thing. We are water beings, by the way. So yes, I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas. It was a great place to grow up. And as I shared with you, my difficulty in life was I'm a dyslexic. So way back in the day, they didn't really know a lot about it, but I had a learning disability and was perceived as different. I often had a hard time, telling you what I saw, my interpretation of it, what I felt, what I knew instinctually, and it just didn't kind of fit that neat little box that everybody said, I was supposed to be in, which frustrated me further. So I oftentimes found myself, not oftentimes, 99% of the time, somewhere outside because I felt accepted there. I felt understood. I got to use my power of observation. I'm very visual. And I was just fascinated with everything that I saw. I loved the snowfall and even looking at shapes of the snow and catching it on my tongue. I was fascinated with the weather, tornadoes, and I could feel what was happening in the environment because I was connected to it. What I do worry, and I'll just say this now because this is just a great place for me to say it, where I'm so concerned about all of us in so many ways is that we have become disconnected from that environment. And when the environment is hurting and we're disconnected, we'll feel it ourselves, but we won't always recognize why it's happening. And so I was very keen on that as a child. And because of my dyslexia, I often felt, set aside or not heard because it wasn't making sense to people, something I observed or asking a question, or I was out of order. And I'd often feel very just kind of down about myself. So my mom was instrumental. She was my cheerleader. She was a journalist. I think that's where I get some of my Snoopy behavior from. She's also a sociology major. She could see that I knew and didn't want my self-esteem to slide through the cracks because she thought I might really get lost at that point. And so she always taught me to have stick-to-itiveness, which I didn't think was a word. And I found out otherwise when she brought out the Webster's Dictionary, and its definition is propensity to follow through in a determined manner, dogged persistence, born of obligation and stubbornness. Okay, see, this I understood. Stubborn was my middle name. And so she also went on to tell me that just because somebody else had a perception of how I was isn't how I had to see myself. So even though I knew I was different, I was taught to embrace it, and I had my stick-to-itiveness. Somebody that was extremely influential in the water world for me was my father. He was a mechanical engineer. He actually ran the pipelines for Citigroup back in the day. So he would see things, but he knew if he just directly hit me with it, I might not take it in. So he'd come down to the creeks with me and stuff, and he'd sing me songs about the water. Enjoy it trickling down the stream, for today it might be seen.
I haven't heard one of those songs.
You haven't? So
No.
he would sing to me because he knew that he could penetrate some feeling about me, because painting a visual and seeing where water issues were on gas and pipelines, I might not have accepted. So he'd just sing me these songs in this wonderful voice. Isn't the water lovely? Trickling down the stream, Erin. Enjoy it today, because for someday it might not be seen. And I'm like, what? I mean, and that struck a chord with me. How is it we could never see water? As I got older, he'd have conversations with me about the importance of us protecting the water, the importance of us speaking up when we saw things wrong with the water. He said, I'm going to promise you, in your lifetime, Erin, water will become more valuable than oil and will probably be traded as a commodity. And I'm like, what? It's water. But he was right. So at a very young age, this was a part of my being. It's where I went to feel safe. And it's my mom and dad that shored me up and taught me subliminal things that I would accept and see. And so it was kind of ingrained in me. And then when I began my work out in that desert town that resulted in the film, oh my gosh, some almost 30 years ago, it all came together for me. I just wasn't really consciously aware of it until I found myself back in a place where those connections with the environment were happening. My observations were keen. I could feel it. Honestly, if you're connected with the environment, you can feel barometric pressures changing. You can feel the silent air. It can be oppressive and heavy on its own. And I become very alert. It's like I'm on my own little barometric pressure system. I could see the trees were dying. I could see that things seemed barren. Look, I wasn't in Kansas anymore because I was looking at two-headed frogs, green water, and animals covered in tumors. So I became very rooted again in the environment, and I knew what I saw, even though everybody wanted to tell me you couldn't possibly be seeing that. And that is what I just stuck in, and I could feel what these people were going through. We knew what we saw. They knew what they were experiencing, but nobody wanted to hear it or see it. I think maybe cover it up and hope that it would all go away.
Yeah, well, that learning disadvantage, as you said earlier to me, is it's a gift, because it makes all your senses so much more heightened and aware, and makes you so intuitive and so connected with the energy of everything.
It's very true. And I didn't recognize that disability, which I thought would be my downfall, was actually a gift, because see, it's just part of me. So I never understood why nobody else ever understood. And I've been working with communities for so long, and we all experience this together. And I see where they will step back because you get well, you're not a scientist or a doctor. Do you have the science? It gets very complex and it's numbers, and that couldn't be happening, or you're a hysterical mom. Honestly, this happens out there. And I was always told, you're not a doctor, a lawyer, scientist. What do you know? And I'm like, see, here's the thing. I want everyone to understand. You don't have to be that, and you don't have to fit in a nice little box to be a human and to have empathy and to see when water's gone wrong and the impact that it has on the environment, the animals, and public health and welfare.
So you focus so much on helping the underserved and being their voice, bringing forth the voice of water. What do you feel we can do to support those communities that often are located in industrial areas where they have extreme pollution and discharging happening. They don't have the support of lobbyists and special interest groups. And they don't often come forward with their own voice because of the kind of fears that you've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do and what can they do to have their voice be heard? Because they're still being affected today. I'm in Flint, Michigan, 20%, 15% of the people still don't have drinking water in their home today. 7 years later.
Yes, this is true. And it's the tip of the iceberg, and the other 90% that have very similar problems we don't talk about. And that's one of the first things that I've learned, that communities have learned, and we've helped each other. They'll reach out to me, I think, for permission, which you never need permission from me to act upon what you know. I'm not going to question the conditions that they're living in. They're living it and breathing it every single day. They're drinking it, and they just don't make this stuff up. So what I found is I come to support and hear them. This is a thing that's so frustrating. It's like they talk and they come to groups and they come together and they make phone calls. They're just not heard. And I don't know if it's because maybe someone's going to bank that you just get tired and go away. So for me, it's just supporting, listening, and believing. I mean, I used to come home at night after spending the day in Hinckley, and it's like, people just don't sit around to make this stuff up. And it's such a relief for them to say, oh my gosh, somebody actually heard me. And one thing that I encourage them to do, and we touched upon that, and this is what's so important to me that I learned from my mom. Don't let others, whoever it may be, whether it's a community, city council or somebody, push you back off what you know. You have to know what you've seen, and that gut sense, we've talked about it, and not let somebody else knock you off, and find your own courage to say, no, I'm living here. I'm experiencing it. My neighbors are experiencing it. My children are experiencing it, and own your story. And sometimes that just takes a lot of courage on our part. I'm one of those people, I'll be the first to raise my hand in the class. And if I'm wrong, okay, I was wrong. Don't be afraid to speak up, and don't be afraid to ask questions. And there is so much that we can do, and that's hear them, rally around them, and give them the tools that they need to begin a water cleanup, to join their community, to getting to their local council, to working with the local reporter and getting their story out. I'll assure you, and even in my book, Superman's Not Coming, I point this out. Every single community, they're natural born leaders. Once we can help activate them with information, or starting their own nonprofits, or with funding, or with science, and get them to city council, they will take off every single time.
Beautiful. Yeah. So this is a topic I wouldn't talk about with many people, but I'm willing to be
I'm scared.
and talk about it with you. So we all are told that tap water is fine, and the tap water we're drinking is just fine. And whatever city it is or state it is, the tap water is great. So let's just talk about, without getting too dark, about okay. I know you and I could get very dark, and I don't want to go there. Okay, we want to keep this uplifted. But I think it's really important just for us to give some clarity and another voice and viewpoint of tap water and what people should be aware of or concerned about.
Okay, so we have, some over 58,000 municipalities in the United States. And we also have some 40 million Americans on well water. We can talk about that in a minute. It's a system off the grid. I want to address something that you just said. And yes, it can be dark. We want to believe, we've been led to believe, and we get comfortable and complacent ourselves in assuming that a situation, an agency has their oversight correct. And it's dark and hurtful when we find out that isn't what's happening. But I believe knowledge is power. And I believe once you know what's going on, the darkness goes away, because you can take action. So while it may feel daunting, I want you to remember there is something each of us can do as an individual, and knowledge is power. Don't be afraid to hear it, look at it, and even do your own research. So I'll start with one thing that's at a big national oversight that we have a problem with in lots of municipalities. Two things. One, we have aging, antiquated infrastructures. It's just that simple. And two, what we're adding and how we're treating our water is affecting those infrastructures. And by way of example, I mean this.
And our health.
Absolutely. So Water 101. Most waters come into the municipal system from rivers, creeks, and tributaries. Water contains organic matter, which is dirt. So they have to bring the water in and treat the dirt, which we do with chlorination. And we can get into a long conversation about that, but this is just Water 101. Because we don't want E. coli and Legionnaire and outbreaks like that. What happens when organic matter and chlorination meet is it creates a toxic, very monitored by the Safe Drinking Water Act compound called trihalomethanes, THMs. When municipalities can't control their THMs, that's where they start to get into trouble. They can't control the dirt. So they start adding more ammonia, less ammonia. And one thing that they've done is they've started adding ammonia, which is called chloramines, which is having a big effect on the municipalities. We don't monitor, we don't have any regulations for what happens in the distribution system, which is hundreds of miles of different pipelines with antiquated infrastructure with the old lead pipes. When you add ammonia to chlorine, you make the water angry and it can become a biofilm feeding frenzy in there. And the ammonia can sequester and render chlorination less effective. And now you have a corrosive water system in the distribution system that's causing the lead to precipitate out into the pipes and being delivered to the tap, unbeknownst to the consumer. If we could look at just that one thing and have a national change and no more ammonias, we would have less Legionnaire outbreaks, less lead outbreaks, less stress on an aging infrastructure, and safer water. That's just one thing to kind of give you a broad look at that is an issue within the municipal systems. And, you know,
that's a wonderful, simple explanation. And thank you for keeping it clean.
I try because it's difficult. I was just going to say, water is never a soundbite. It's a story. So I can't just always explain something real fast.
Yeah, well, that was a really great explanation. It shows your scientific prowess in addition to your activism prowess. And
it hurts my brain. It hurts my brain.
Well, you're good at it. You talked about, well, so it leads us into PFAS. Lots of people do not know about PFAS. And even though they've been around since the 50s, they originally started, that they are in pretty much almost everything in almost everybody's bodies, and that they are a significant hazard to our health on many different levels. And so once again, I don't want to alarm people, but I think it's just important for people to understand about PFAS and the critical need as it's going to get larger and larger. And we think this is a critical focal point we're focused on is remediation of PFAS.
Wow, that's not going to be a short response, Stuart. You know this, right?
No, but this is so big and so important.
I'm not sure where to even begin. So PFA, PFOS, PFAS, PFOA. So recently there was a film out called Dark Waters about an attorney, Rob Bilott, who took on DuPont, and they took him on for 20 years regarding Parkersburg, West Virginia. And it's a situation where he went out there and they were dumping PFOA. So you would know it as Teflon. PFOS, the PFAS, you would know as Scotchgard. You would know it as firefighting foams. You would know it as flame retardant. very toxic chemicals. About, I don't know, a couple of decades ago, 3M and DuPont created this PFC group of family of chemicals where they've taken about 3,000 different chemicals into one, and it falls under the PFCs. One of them is PFOA, firefighting foam, PFOS, PFAS, and the list goes on.
Yes.
So they knew as early as the 60s that this chemical was going to be a problem. And boy, howdy, is it. We have a big problem. And again, I think the best way to explain this one chemical, and I asked myself, how did it even get into the system first? So by way of example, the EPA is notified by these manufacturers that this chemical is going to be a problem. It is now called the forever chemical. And it's not just our problem, it's the world's problem. So when the EPA is notified, they're like, all right, so we're going to set a guideline. And a guideline was set on this chemical of 400 parts per trillion. So that means municipalities can run it through the systems up to 400 parts per trillion. So this is a place where I look at how the system's set up. And I don't want to get bogged down on any blame here because that's going to get us nowhere. I want us to have this conversation to look at where the failures occurred and where we can find technology and solutions to change it moving forward. So the EPA has created a guideline of 400 parts per trillion. Where it came from, I don't know, because there was no science on this yet, other than what 3M or DuPont was willing to release back when. So off they go. The municipalities have the guideline and life goes on. EPA commissions a study to look at what this chemical does in the environment, to the water, and potentially public health and welfare. These studies cost millions and millions of dollars for just one chemical. And these studies take time. We just don't know overnight. It takes 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years. So what happened around 2015, maybe to late 2014, guess what happens? Science has now come in. And I call it the moment where science catches up with policies. And EPA is notified, Houston, we have a problem. This chemical is everywhere. And this chemical causes definitely high cholesterol, fertility issues, testicular cancer, thyroid problems, and the science is still coming in. So at this point, EPA is like, we're going to have to reduce that guideline. So they went from 400 PPTs to 70. So here's something interesting that happens. All the municipalities are like going, whoa, wait a minute. We don't have the filtration and what we need or the funding to bring it down to 70 parts per trillion. Now they notify the consumer. Well, guess what the consumer does? They notify me. And they're like, is this why my son has testicular cancer? Is this why I have high cholesterol? Yes. And it just goes on. And I don't get an email from one community in one state. I'm getting them from everybody in every state. So we now have this ginormous problem with this PFAS in municipal water, in the aquifers, in well water, coming off military bases. We are looking at military men and women's exposure, firefighters, everyday citizens who were drinking this water unbeknownst to them. And what worries me about the forever chemical, and I love what you're doing, is we have to look at the technology and remediation on how we draw this back and what we're going to do to remove this chemical. It's frightening. You know, we've seen a couple of studies. I just did one piece with The Guardian that an epidemiologist, and this is peer-reviewed science, is concerned about the infertility issues, and that projections by 2050 could be, 80, 90% sterility. Okay, see, this is an issue for humankind. And I don't think burying our head in the sand, even though it's dark, is wise. We need to have the conversation and we need to begin to implement better technology, newer regulations, policies. how we can control this situation, because the impact on public health and welfare is there, the impact to the water. And one thing that we've done is it's now contaminated the food chain. This is found in dairy cattle. They've had to remove the milk from the shelf. This is found in donkey's milk. This is found in the eggs. This is found in the cattle. So we have a water issue and now a food supply issue and a public health issue.
Well, thank you for keeping it concise.
Oh, that was dark. I can just feel it.
We could have gotten a lot darker for sure. So I want to go to one other place you've mentioned about well water. Most people think that if they've got well water, it's great, it's perfect, it's like the best water you can have, which can be true. However, it's a bit naive. So I'd love you to educate people about just a little bit more about well water.
Every big case, and you know, the law does get involved on this side, have been well water. Hinckley, California was well water. And it's a system off the grid. So the health departments will come out and do water testing, but they're looking for E. coli. They're not looking for a plethora of 1,500 different chemicals. And some of chemicals can be naturally occurring. You know, nitrates are a real problem in water, fluoridation. I mean, we didn't even touch upon that. But you, as the owner of the well, it is your responsibility to do all the testing. And oftentimes they think they have a fresh, you know, spring artesian well and it's safe. I just got an email right before we got on from a community up in New Hampshire on artesian well. Guess what? They just found out it's loaded with PFAS. So it's in artesian water, and well owners need to be alert. You know, we're working in Fairfield, Maine right now. They have a very large PFAS contamination. They're all on well water. So ask questions. You can call certain labs in your area and have someone come out and do a metal sweep and a whole chemical sweep on your well. That's how you're going to find out and detect what could be in your water. And it's not something that you would know about or that any agency does, other than the health department can come out and they'll just mostly look for E. coli bacteria. They will never look for all these unwanted chemicals in our water that could be lurking there that you're unaware of. So well owners, and they're very protective of their water, as they should be, and oftentimes don't know these things. The same thing happened in Hoosick Falls, New York. And I want to share this story because this goes to the difference these next generations up and coming are going to make in our water and our biosphere and saving it. And I know that sounds like the sky is falling, but you know what? There's some real problems out there. So in Hoosick Falls, again, another community on well water contaminated with PFAS. So we did blood testing. Everybody had their wells tested. And once we got involved, then the state will come out and start doing more well testing because they need to identify how large this, we call it a plume, pollution is or isn't. And in Hoosick Falls, high levels, it was Saint-Gobain. It was definitely the PFOA, the PFOS. We did blood draws. It's like 50 times the standard of what PFAS amounts you should have in your body in the children. So from a legal perspective, there was a statute of limitations concern. So the children marched in Albany on the Capitol wearing placard cards around their neck with their PFOA blood levels. When our children are comparing PFOA blood levels and lead levels in their bodies for change, we have gone too far. And we need to stop and take a look at this. I was floored. And that is all communities on well water, unbeknownst to them.
So as we talk about children and such a critical issue of young people and whether it's pregnant mothers or infants that are being fed, whether it happens to be breast milk or infant formula, yet when you and I talked earlier about the youth and how the youth are our future and are so critical. And with your new book, Superwoman, yes.
I had to put it up.
you know, you are a superwoman, and you talk about the fact that everyone is. And so I'd love for you to share more with the youth about how they can be super beings, and they can do what you have done to be a servant to protect people and to take care of the health of ourselves, our species, and our planet.
Well, I don't think of myself as Superwoman. I'm human, and I don't take for granted. Look, without water and air, we are nothing. I think we all know that. And what I want the youth to know is what I felt as a child, and I see still happening. And I think we have a moment where we're in a watershed moment. We're going to bust out of that. I want you to know you don't have to fit any nice little box to be able to do science, to do math, to believe in yourself, and to care about water and own it. You're chock full of amazing, intuitive, common sense set of skills. Don't poo-poo that. I mean, I connect to your environment. Make observations. If you'll pause for a moment, you'll be able to make that connection. And I don't want them to stop believing that they can. There's just seems to be, yeah, be this, be that, do this, do that. I talk about this all the time. I talk about my 4 L's. Use your logic, use some leverage. Leverage isn't a bad word. Leverage is a collective. Don't be afraid to extend your hand and say to someone else, join me. Logic, leverage, loyalty. Here, this is be true to your cause. And it's like a big sporting event. When you go into the game and you have that ball, don't second guess yourself. You've got it, go for it. But no, you may pick up 20 yards and get pushed 30 back. That's okay. Don't give up. Don't beat yourself up for that. Pick the ball back up and get in that game again and keep pushing forward. Even if you push forward 50, you're pushed back 40. Pick it up. You might rush 70 and get pushed back 10, and the next time, make it across that field goal. The message is you really need to believe in yourself and be a human, to appreciate, respect, and understand that we are water. We are nothing without water. With climate change, water is in trouble. There's going to be too much water, too much flooding, not enough water, droughts. My gosh, did I just read an article in Kansas that they expect in 35 years their aquifers are dry? Wait a minute. So I want them to own the environment because they are the environment. I want them to reconnect to it. It's not silly. It's who we are. I have learned my fortitude and my resiliency from water. Think about this. Anyone out here today, if you just close your eyes and you're stressed and you want to get away somewhere where you can take a breath, feel your heartbeat, smell the rain, feel the sun, everything about the environment that is the greatest gift we have. You'll find yourself connecting there again. And think about where you go when you're stressed. It's outside. It is. And I find myself to water. I look at water like this. If we had a big imagery right now from space of our water, all the rivers and creeks and the tributaries look like the veins running through our body. It's amazing. And to even look at the ocean, that's our big heartbeat that comes in and goes out. And think about, Stuart, you and I talked about this. When tide comes in, it doesn't raise one ship, it raises all ships. And when I look at the resiliency of water forever moving forward, and it's moody like us, sometimes it's tumultuous, sometimes it's still, sometimes it's quiet, just like us, because we are water. And then to see when all the rivers and creeks and tributaries converge together, oh my gosh, what an incredible, powerful source. This is not Niagara Falls. That is who we are. Oh my gosh, Go to the ocean and watch the waves. I've learned as it crashes and it peels back the layer of the rock, you get to see what's inside. The environment's done that for me. It does it for all of us. It turns us to who we are, to look inside. When water can do that, and you are water, you have the same resiliency. You can carve hills and valleys. You can change landscapes because water is you. You are water. And that's where I go. And that's what I've been taught from the environment. To disconnect from the environment would be to disconnect from myself. When you have yourself and you find yourself, you will fight for what we need. And you know, when we assess and look at who we are, this isn't about what car we drive. This is about our character and our soul to the very core of what we are. Water and this planet and its protection and its, in turn, our own survival.
Such a beautiful message to all of us, not just our youth. And, you know, we can criticize and chastise the youth for all the problems they've got and their selfishness and, you know.
We all have problems.
Yeah, we all have them. But for you to say, you know, instead of them spending the whole time on that device and to get out into this where I am beautiful nature and to be in this fresh air and to be around the trees and the plant and the water is so healing. And we need to have children, particularly, have more time to be able to get outside. I don't know if you've ever seen the studies that have been done by Waterfalls. Have you seen this?
By Waterfalls.
Yeah. So
no, you're going to enlighten me though. I'm excited.
Yeah. They've taken, this was done, I think, in Denmark. They had taken 30 children who are autistic children, and they brought them to a waterfall every day for 40 days. They measured their mental capacity and acuity and did all these skills and tests. And at the end of 40 days, they tested them again, and they were over 30% higher in their mental tests and acuity by sitting by a waterfall, because they're being bathed in that water and in the frequency, the energy, the healing of water, which is not just a physical, it is truly energetic with the hydrogen and the oxygens that happen. And you and I can get into a lot longer discussion about that, which at some point we will for sure, and we'll drink to that as well.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay, in Hawaii. So,
but it's really true. And you know what? Here's the thing. Disconnect from this. I do it too. It doesn't mean to give it up. Just disconnect for a moment and reconnect. And we talk about the youth, and even look at them at spring break. Oh, they all go to that ocean. They'll go to the water. I think that subconsciously they're taking things in, but not always consciously aware of it. That certainly happened for me. I'm just glad they're there, because while they may not realize it, and to your study, they are taking it in. And I think somewhere in their being, they know.
Yes.
And so you don't have to give up your phone. You can just disconnect, you know, for an hour.
Yes. So what's next for Erin? In whatever dimension of your life, what's next for you? What's up?
You know, Stuart, I flow like water. I never know where it's going to lead me.
That's a good way to be. Being liquid water instead of
just
being
flow like water.
I know that feeling. Being here in Kauai has really melted me. And as you said earlier, water is so emotional, and it is the element of emotion. When we cry or when we have joy, we have tears. And water is the element that is the common element to everything. I want to comment earlier, as you made a really important comment, for us not to criticize or talk down about companies as an example. And so I just want to give a little recognition that 3M, as an example, has recently come out and committed $1 billion to remediation of their activities. And we're working intimately with 3M and want to acknowledge them for their commitment. And we're going to hold them to that. So we're excited about that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and it's very, very true. And listen, you know, I'm known to go after companies and corporations, and there has always been an open door to work together with them. They have the technology, they have the funding, they have the person power to be accountable and own that. And let's make it right. We all appreciate what this can bring for every one of us. But when we go a bridge too far, my point is we have to all have a seat at that table and own and be accountable for what's happened. Now, let's find that solution and make that contribution. Work with the people, work with the environment. You have the means, make those contributions so we can get this fixed.
Well, and we're going to do it together, and we're going to do it by having a voice, as you say. And we had a conversation earlier today with Scott Harrison of Charity Water, and his desire and passion, where he's created this as a nonprofit, Charity Water, but he's really made it to be a business. It's a social venture.
Mm-hmm.
And that, we believe, is part of the solution here, is to create these innovations of technology that are going to be water innovations that are going to come from all over the planet, particularly from the youth, that are going to create these new ways for us to have a relationship that is more sacred and more valuing our water, and that will improve what we've done. I mean, we didn't intend, right, for all these chemicals to have, and plastic to have the impact it had. No one really thought about it, but here we are.
Correct.
And
you're right, here we are. Everything that we did was all good, well intended, but as we've moved along and everything has changed, and I think of the earth in this way. If you go to the bank, your ATM card, and you just withdraw, right? There's all of a sudden they're like, yeah, no more money for you, right? Without making a deposit back. We've kind of done that with the earth. We've taken and taken and taken and taken and taken and taken and taken as we became this industrialized society and more people. And now here we are, we've taken enough that Mother Earth is tired, and we need to make deposits back to her and work together. And I think that we all get it. And again, we have to work with these companies, and we just need to be accountable, not hide anything, or just transparency. Look, I have learned this about people. They'll handle the truth. They may get mad, but in the end, it's the lie that creates the real problem. And so let's just be transparent, and hey, we got an issue, but hey, we're here to make it right, and we're going to have to get busy fixing it.
Well, which brings me to the idea of climate change. It is such a divisive term, and it's so bipartisan. And I have been thinking for a long time that we need to change the language around it, because climate change is all water issue. As you said earlier, it's either too much or too little water. It's droughts, it's floods, it's hurricanes, it's fires, it's melting glaciers. And we haven't really made that connection so well to understand that water is the common essential element to everything. And for us to look at water being that fundamental, one of our advisors said to us recently that for the United Nations, when they take water as the #1 issue in the 17 SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, then when they solve that, all the others will be solved, because water affects all of those intimately. And so I lead that to say that we're going to be having a clubhouse chat in a little bit tonight. And we're going to be talking about, let's get down and dirty on cleaning up our water. And it's going to be hosted by the United Nations 75 call on Clubhouse. And we'll have a lot of people that'll be there. That'll be quite exciting for that discussion. And one little piece, I've never heard you talk about the movie and about like what it was like. I'd just love for you to give a little bit more intimacy about what it was like to have a movie made about you, and how you stayed so humble since that occurred.
It was very surreal. It was, honestly, had I even ever said to anybody as a kid, oh yeah, I'm going to get involved in water and someone's going to come along and make a movie about it and Julia Roberts will play in it, you would have really thought, okay, what's wrong with that girl? I was just doing me, people ask me that all the time. Sometimes I don't say this in a bad way. It's not that I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm on some kind of autopilot. I know it, I feel it, and I'm drawn to do it. It's like surreal. Pardon me?
You're like water.
Yeah, it's, ow, you hurt me. So you did, you hurt the water, you hurt me. And it's been surreal, but I've always said Erin Brockovich isn't about me. It's about all of us. And my favorite film wasn't Erin Brockovich, it's Pay It Forward. You know, I've learned that it's okay to be kind, and it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be afraid, and it's okay not to know. And I think that those are real strengths that we have, and we forget that. And so I'm happy that it continues to be a conversation that I thought was really going to be had in the year 2000 when it came out, yet we're still talking about it today, and it's even more impactful today. And so I'm proud of it. It was a surprise. You know, the night I went to the movie premiere, literally my knees were knocking together like that. At one point they said they were going to have to take me home. I was just so overwhelmed. But I'm glad that it was well received. It continues on, but the message is bigger and more important now than it was then. And like I told you, I think we're in a watershed moment. I believe that. I know it and I feel it. And I know it may sound silly. 2020 was rough, and COVID pushed us to a stop. It's our reset. It's our reboot. It's that watershed moment where we're stopped. And we've been looking around, and we, you know, my gosh, even I get so busy. I was flabbergasted in 2020 being home. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea there were so many bird nests in my yards. You know, I mean, wow. And the owls, and it was all there and it gives you a moment to self-reflect, to stop. So I think we've had a great reset. We've had a reboot, and we have a watershed moment, and we have realized and woken up. Yes, there could be trouble, but yes, we can change that course. And so while it's felt overwhelming to me, I do feel more hope right now moving forward than I think I have in a very long time. And so it's just been overwhelming for me. Surreal, weird. I don't know what to say. It's just strange.
Well, it's just, you're just so raw and real and vulnerable, and it didn't go to your head, and you're just still on your path and your passion and commitment to doing well in the world and being like water. You know,
when you get down there to water, I mean, it's pretty sure of itself. It doesn't let you get too ahead of yourself. I mean, I think I read something, I think it was Goldie Hawn, and a comment her dad had made: whenever you get too big for your britches, go down to that ocean. it will show you. So, you know, we're human beings, and nothing is perfect. But for me, it's just about accountability and owning and knowing that we're in trouble. What are we going to do if we've poisoned all our water and all of our food? We just can't keep going this way.
Well,
and I don't think that we will.
It's water's time. It's for us to focus on water and the importance of water, the sacredness and the value of water, and the relatedness it has to every single aspect of our lives. And it always comes back home. If we talked about it, it's an inside job. We are water beings, so we got to bring it back home and take care of ourselves and our health. And when we do that, we'll take care of everything, all the plants, all the species that are here,
Absolutely.
all the rivers, and all that is connecting us, which is what water does. Water is the uniting and unifying element that brings us all in our oneness and that togetherness.
That is well said. My kindred spirit. This is true.
We're going to have lots of watershed moments together. So I want to extend my deep gratitude and my deep respect to you. You have just been persistent like water, drop after drop after drop, never giving up. And you have modeled for us behavior of one person can change the world. And you have, and you continue to do so. And so you're an inspiration. I hope you're an inspiration for a lot of young people, because we are depending upon the youth to help this planet in the ways that we just didn't understand it. And I think they're cut out for the job, and they have our support, right? We'll be there every step of the way to help them, but we need their leadership.
Absolutely. And I want them to be excited about water, because you need to be excited about yourself, because you are water, and there's so much to do in there, and it encompasses every single aspect of our life and what you want to get involved in your career, and it's actually exciting. And I want to encourage them to, I hope that they feel that same excitement as well. And I know it feels overwhelming at times, but like I said in the book, Superman's not coming, and that's not frightening. I think that's exciting, because we're here. And that's the point. It is about a national water crisis, but we give you some tools in there to look at and to share other stories and to understand it and to take action. Once you know it, they will. But the big message is what we, the people, can do about it. And we can make that change. I know we will.
We are making this change as we speak. So once again, thank you so much.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. I was excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, more to come. And as I said earlier, if anyone wants to come onto Clubhouse and join us there for the UN 75, we'll be there in a lively conversation about cleaning up our water together.
Have we been on for an hour?
Time flies.
Oh my gosh. I was just going to turn my phone on and check the time. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything that you're doing. Every bit matters. And I know some people think, and I have this conversation sometimes with my friend, well, I'm just one voice. It doesn't matter. Oh, yes, it does. And I learned that in Hinckley and everywhere I go. Here's the thing. Mathematically, 1 + 1 = 2. But in principle, 1 + 1 is 10,000 and more. And we did that in Hinckley and everywhere else. We became 1, then 2, then 5, then 50, then 100, then 200, then 500. That momentum here was every River Creek tributary coming in together. And it was like, yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, we'll leave on that high water mark, and we'll look forward to.
By you, high water mark, like it.
Okay, thank you, Erin.
Stuart, thank you. It was so great to see you again.
Sending you love.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.